Okay, so before I start this, I have to legally say this because it's kind of a disclaimer for myself, but also to keep myself accountable. I am not a lawyer, and so I couldn't find a lawyer for this particular episode that I needed a lawyer's kind of perspective on. So I'm gonna follow this case, trying to kind of explain it to the best of my ability, which may not come off as a lot of knowledge, but then I guess my question would be, then what would we consider, right? Because it's a weird thing, right? So legally, like I'm looking at this case legally of the bill, it's a New York State bill about how they wanted to handle creative expression in a weird sense, and I'm gonna explain why I think it's weird. Um, it's a weird thing, I think, like looking at it legally. But I'm not a lawyer, but I do have a criminal justice background, so I'm gonna talk about it from that perspective. But I'm also going to kind of try to make sense of it, because there are artists that are against it, like J. Cole, 50 Cent. They said Travis Scott, but I didn't see Travis Scott listed. So, and Mary J. Blige, allegedly. I'm gonna say allegedly because I didn't see Travis Scott and I didn't see Mary J. Blige, allegedly. One like the people that were talking about it publicly. So, it's a weird case for me. I think looking at this case, you're like, so what? Necessarily is this case, right? Because a lot of people think, well, wouldn't this fall under freedom of speech? And to some extent, I think it would, but I think it would cause other problems, really. I think it would cause other problems, and I'm going to talk about those other problems kind of in this episode, and we're going to see where we get. But for the most part, just kind of like a brief summary of it. It's only the actual bill is only like 2 pages long, so this is going to sound more like a formal kind of tone when I talk about this bill, but also looking at it from a weird, different perspective, which is, they said it will be in effect immediately, but this is November 21st, 2021 is when the bill was supposed to be in effect, or whenever they pass it, or this is a proposal, and then the actual bill has to be approved. It's approved through, I think it's approved through one house. I'm not sure at this time what that house is, but I don't know. I'm just gonna give my brief opinion on it because it is passed in one house, not in the other. For the New York State delegations and representatives. So I'm gonna talk about this bill and kind of talk about the weird thing. I guess I wonder about, because I'm not entirely sure where this falls legally. So I'm gonna get right into that real quick. But let's see if we have any sponsors. I'll get right into it.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Okay, so let me briefly talk about this. I think this episode, so the bill is called S7527, which is the actual name of the bill, and the overall name of the bill is, it's going to be used for criminal cases, which to some extent I don't necessarily understand, right? Because under freedom of speech, you can do and say what you want, and the government cannot charge you. However, with this bill and these articles, it's a weird slope, and then it would question to me what would happen for double jeopardy, right? Because I would wonder what would be the grounds. Like they say, the judge or the court has to approve that the evidence is sound enough with the evidence, or relevant enough for the evidence, or it proves something. The lyrics or the evidence in question would have to add to the person's would have to add to the case to show either perspective or to show the true intent behind it. But I wonder, because in my mind, now this is probably not how it was supposed to be. It probably was, but I wonder, because it says creative expression. It lists as creative expression, but it says it has to be approved by the court, and they can use it only as evidence as it relates to a person's character. But that would still be he said versus she said, which doesn't always stand up in court, which to some extent would be the problem I have with this bill, right? Because while it does set a standard, I think you run into too many different obstacles that you can't avoid with this bill. And the only reason I bring this bill up is because it's rap related, but it says creative expression, right? So the way creative expression is written in this bill is that it says dance, art, poetry, literature. Yeah, dance, art, literature, poetry, film, and media, which I think, if you ask me, isn't media, the freedom of speech law would protect you from the media, right? Like, you can say what you want against the government, and they can't go after you and charge you for it, is what I believe the freedom of speech bill is. Now, that's limited as well, because there's certain things you can't say, and the reasons you can't say them is because of the safety of others. But I don't know, right? Because they say that the court has to approve that it's enough evidence, or it's valid enough evidence to be added into the court case. But then I would think that would be subjective depending on the person's case. Now, if the person doesn't have a strong case and they use the evidence to back up their claim of why this person is guilty, that seems faulty to me. I think, granted, now we also have to take into account that a lot of rappers say a lot of stuff because they can get famous off of it, and that some people do not live that life that they are writing about, or they have ghostwriters, songwriters that live through these lives. And so then with that, right, because it also says in this bill, it refers to they either have to say something that is a crime or acknowledge that the process of a crime will happen, which I think I have an issue with, only because there isn't a lot of things that you can there's a lot of things that I think a lot of people don't read laws thoroughly enough, but not every law is enforced to an extent, right? Because I think what is it? Florida has a law against Virginia has a law against carrying bathtubs down the sidewalk, which I think is a weird bill. Florida has a bill that is about, what is it, a pet alligator? And then there's a federal law in the United States that you can't. It's a weird law. It's something you can't carry across state lines, and it's a normal thing that people use, but you can't carry it across state lines because it's a weird thing, right? Like, it's a weird federal law, a fear standard. But also, I think I'm looking at this from an all sides perspective, which I still have an issue with, because literature that people focus on today were written from past times. Right, in past times, in past laws, common law, which people don't look at enough, past laws, there are things that were written that were not written in a sensitive nature. They were written the way they were written, and, by them authors, or them authors are now dead. Rest in peace to their authors. But I think you run the risk of saying that expression of art, or that it has been used in a crime, or that they're going to commit a crime, which I still think that's kind of weird because a lot of artists don't live that way, right? A lot of artists say stuff because they don't live that way, but they know it does well in promotion. But this puts in the question: what would be freedom of speech against the law, right? Because freedom of speech law is anything, you can say anything you want, and the government can't put you in jail. But this law just seems to do the exact different. It just has a statute for creative expression, which I think creative expression is art, but they say art, poetry, literature, film, and media, which I think media is protected by freedom of speech. I would believe that film is protected by freedom of speech. Poetry, I'm not sure, but I would assume is covered under freedom of speech. Like, that's something I don't know, right? Because they have to admit that they know that it's a crime or are committing a crime. And I think now, while there are a lot of laws that have crimes, a lot of crimes aren't really charged. Like jaywalking's a crime, but I don't think I know people that have jaywalked and got tickets for it. I don't know. It's a weird thing to look at because I think cursing is a law. Cursing is against the law, but it's not enforced, right? But I wonder, will this law be enforced to put people on trials? But I don't know if you put somebody on trial with that, would you get a? Because my whole worry is that somebody uses their lyrics in court and they don't have the evidence to back it up, and they say, well, this is to prove that the defendant proves that he was trying to force bodily harm, and it's not necessarily that he was trying to cause bodily harm to somebody or somebody else, which I think is weird, different standard wise. But I don't know how you enforce this. I think that's my thing. I don't know how you enforce this, right? Because there's also a law for disclaimer alert, but there's also a law against suicide in some states, but I don't think they enforce it as much as, I don't think they enforce that law, right? There's the jaywalking law, they don't enforce that. The tub law, they don't enforce that. The curse law, they don't enforce that. But I don't know. I think this bill should be revised. I think there are ways to do it. I think when you say creative expression, we run into, okay, so what is creative expression? Because some of this literature was before this law. A bunch of this music is before this law. It just, you run into things where you're like, art, but I don't know. They say performance art or normal art or visual art, but I don't know if visual art from a script that we're performing, performance art that we are performing from a play would be considered. I don't know. That's what I wonder. I think this could be revised. I think this does need to be revised. I think maybe, I'm trying to protect a rap, but I'm also trying to figure out who this helps. The judge has to approve it, but then would that jeopardize double jeopardy? Because would that affect double jeopardy? Because double jeopardy, if they take it and get it appealed, because they say that this evidence was crucial to the case, it crucially hurt that defendant's case, and that evidence is dropped, would they ever get that? Would they even get the case? Because it'd be considered double jeopardy. Or if they go free and then they admit to it in another song, I think that's my thing. My thing would be falling on double jeopardy. Is that a smart way to do it? Probably not. I think this needs to have a revision. It's only 2 pages. I was expecting 30 pages for this memo, but it's really only page and a half, right? So it's a weird law. I think I do think this needs to be revised, but I don't know if you can just put this out there firsthand and expect to have a genuine consensus on how this bill helps, because the judge has to approve it or the court has to approve that this evidence is vital. But you can get evidence proved as vital and not have a case. So I don't know. I think this has to be revised. I don't know why, but I think either this has to go in more detail, because they do have they have other factors for it. But I don't know. They said it can't factor as evidence, but I don't know. It can't have the same value as evidence, but I don't know that prosecutors will use it and say, well, this isn't evidence. I think they would introduce as evidence 1.2 or 1A or 2B if that is legally passed by the court. And I don't know that it helps rappers, but I know it doesn't help performers. I guess visual art could be audio art, but I don't know. I think that you run it, because I know this is partially because of drill rap and the drill scene that has happened in New York, or that the relation that people believe that visual art has to the crucial death toll that is in New York City, related to if it's gun violence, if it's knife violence, if it's just random fights and beating up. There's violence in New York, and you can't deny it. But I don't know if we can relate the two. Like, they might have a small correlation, but I'm not sure the correlation is massive enough for us to do this bill as it is. To set this memo as it is, I don't know. I think this definitely has to be revised, but I don't know how to revise it enough to make it specific enough where it's vital enough to help New York. I think this hurts New York more than it does help, because there is Broadway in New York. This runs the risk of affecting a lot of people, and I think this has to be discussed.